and welcome to episode 36 of Can We Still Be Friends, the podcast that tests the limits of the friendship between two people who mistake movie taste for personal morality. I'm Nate Goss, here with Ryan Ebling. For a second year in a row, the Academy has failed to nominate a single person of color in the 4 acting categories. This complete omission of non-white nominees highlights a problem the Oscars have had for 88 years. Some argue that it isn't that non-white people are actively omitted, there are just fewer nomination-worthy performances by people of color. And while that argument is fallacious for several reasons, it also doesn't address the issue that people of color have been ignored for awards even when they have created widely acclaimed films. The film we decided to do for this episode, Boyz N the Hood, is one such example. Neither Ryan nor I have seen this movie, but it has been highly respected ever since it came out in 1991, and it has always been on our watch list.
Boyz N the Hood was well received by critics upon its release and received a 20-minute standing ovation at the Cannes Film Festival. It was a surprise box office hit, and it earned first-time writer-director John Singleton 2 Oscar nominations, one for his original screenplay and one for directing, making him both the youngest Best Director nominee at 24 years old and the first black person ever nominated for the award. He failed to win either Oscar. The film's lasting impact, however, is in its unique perspective on inner-city life. Released just 1 year before Los Angeles police officers were acquitted for the beating of Rodney King, sparking the LA riots, Boyz N the Hood gave America a look at the hearts and minds of residents of South Central LA.
Years later, though, how does Boyz N the Hood hold up? Is it still a vital and vibrant voice in film?
Or have its message and methods lost the magic they once had? Keep listening.
Somebody must have been praying for that fool. 'Cause I swear I aimed right for his head.
You should have blew it off.
Don't say that. Don't say that. You just would have been contributing to killing another brother. And where are these fools? We've been waiting out here for almost an hour, you know that?
That is Lawrence Fishburne as Furious Styles talking to his son after a break-in, and he, shot at the intruder but didn't kill him. And we see that young Trey has already sort of bought into the culture of violence, and his father is trying hard to teach him the correct ways to keep him out of that path,
Which he pretty much does through the entire film for the most part.
Yeah.
Trying to teach him the ways.
Yeah. So today we're talking about Boyz N the Hood, like we said. It's a conversation prompted by the Oscars for another year not nominating any non-white actors in the 4 acting categories.
Right. It seems like they have maybe tried to make some amends by changing the rules.
Which is good. I think that is honestly a good step.
It's a good step, yeah. Doesn't change this year, though.
No. So we're talking about Boyz N the Hood because back in 1991, which, was 25 years ago now, Boyz N the Hood is celebrating its 25th anniversary. John Singleton, at 24 years old, was the first black person nominated for Best Director.
Which is crazy. I mean, we're talking absolutely new director, like never
never made anything. Was still in film school while he wrote the movie. Yeah, especially egregious considering Do the Right Thing came out 2 years earlier.
Oh, the omission, you mean, of Spike Lee as being nominated.
The egregious omission of Spike Lee, who maybe made his best movie
in
1989.
The best American
and
films
one of the best American films ever. Yeah. Made especially worse by the fact that Driving Miss Daisy won Best Picture that year.
That hurts.
Which is such pandering.
Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, it's been a while, but just talk about whitewashing.
No kidding.
Race relations. So it's been kind of hotly debated. How do people of color respond to this? There are some people boycotting it, some people saying that's not going to do anything. You've got white actors saying, well, it's not about race, it's about talent.
Right. And this, which I don't know, this Ryan, we are white.
We are white.
We are
We're
super
very
white.
We're
and
very white.
It's very, I don't know, it's It's a challenging conversation, I think, even for us to have on this podcast.
Yeah, I think
for who we are with our identity.
Absolutely.
And,
where I have kind of come to in, talking about racial inequality and that sort of thing, all I can say is I have no idea.
Right.
I have no idea. I do not at all act like I understand, because I don't. But I do see the inequality.
Yes.
And I do see the systemic problem. And okay, so maybe you could possibly argue that it's a talent thing, and the white performances that we saw, the 20 performances that were nominated were better than a black.
That the awards are all about merit. There was just nothing this year. Yeah,
you can maybe argue that. I don't agree with it, but you could argue that. But the fact is, the number of movies made by white people is so disproportionate. It's just the most tangible thing to point to as the problem. And if you stop at the Oscar nominations as the problem, then you've got a very weak argument that can stand up. But we understand that the problem is not just those nominations, that the problem goes so much deeper than that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we also have no idea what it feels for the problem to go deeper. Like we are not trying to be the voice. We're just trying to explore an issue that we think is very important and do it through movies, which is our
that's our thing.
Frame of reference.
That's what the podcast is.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's a long disclaimer, but I really think it needs to be said. We want to talk about this movie. We know we won't solve the issue, and I think we won't get anywhere by necessarily discussing it, but we do want to see what Boyz N the Hood has to say, and honestly, how it is to look at it 25 years later. How does it stand up as a movie?
Neither one of us has seen Boyz N the Hood, so we don't necessarily need to go into a whole lot of talk about why we didn't see it or anything like that, unless you want to share anything like that.
I think...
I mean, we're pretty young.
Well, yeah. No, yes. I was 6 when this movie came out.
Yeah.
I'm definitely not going to see it. But I do think, here's the thing. I've in reflecting on my life, I've realized, though, that 1991 and 1992 and black culture coming out of LA is actually a pretty important part of my childhood, my growing up, in sort of a negative way. All that was coming out of LA at the time, I don't know if you remember, it was all
I remember
LA
so
riots,
vividly seeing the riots on TV and being scared as a kid seeing that.
Seeing them seeing the footage of
Reginald Denny was the truck driver.
The truck driver who got pulled out of his semi-truck and beaten. The looting, the fires, and add to that the hysteria over gangster rap, the hysteria over cop killer.
Yeah. And let's just be honest here. You grew up in kind of rural Wisconsin.
Near Milwaukee, yeah.
I grew up in rural Indiana. There wasn't a whole lot of sympathy for what was going on from the black perspective in all of that, in just my environment and where I was. I remember, seeing the Rodney King beating on TV a lot. They played it a lot on the news. I remember seeing the verdict when the cops were acquitted and being like, the tone of the people around me was, but he was a criminal.
Right. He deserved to get beat.
And as a kid, you don't think much further than that, and looking back, it's so offensive.
It is, because honestly, the word over the years, as I look back on it, the word criminal, the word thug have all been used in place of the word black. And it honestly, as a kid, I only grew up around white people, and because of the way the news portrayed it, I honestly had a fear of black people. That's just honest.
Even rap was something that it was the bad kids listened
Everything
to rap
was
music.
Aggressive and violent, in their interpretation of it. All they heard was the violence, not at all well, why would these people be feeling violent? Why would these artists be expressing themselves in a way that they needed to feel like?
It was as if they were angry for no reason.
Right.
And it wasn't like we stopped all that often to think about maybe their anger has not just a little justification, but a whole hell of a lot of justification.
Yeah, and NWA is actually having so much self-control right now.
Yeah.
To be trying to address it through music.
Yeah. And it's not till, way later that I think both of us have been like, we just don't understand.
Embarrassingly later.
Embarrassing. Yes.
But so Boyz N the Hood, it was all tied into that for me. So when I started, as I grew older in college and getting interested in film and saw Boyz N the Hood up there with, a lot of the other movies that are seen as milestones in film, I was like, Boyz N the Hood? Really? Like, it just seemed like...
Yeah. And I'll be honest, by the time I was looking into that, as far as like, what is important, like, what should I see?
Right.
What should I go back and check out? And Do the Right Thing was definitely there, and I caught up with it.
Gosh.
But I'll be honest, Boyz N the Hood, the title alone kind of threw me off because it's kind of cheesy. I don't know. I don't know any way to put it. It feels late 80s,
90s.
It
feels commercial.
Yes, like a studio put this together, and they wanted to pander to black culture with the N instead of actually spelling out and it wasn't until
and the Z and
and it wasn't until even maybe for this podcast that we looked into it, and I was like, oh yeah, that's actually John Singleton is someone who this is something he embodied, and it was his project. It was a personal
his
project.
Story.
Yeah,
he lived.
It's coming from a very true place, and so I should not have written it off so long ago.
Right. And so on seeing it, I see how honest it was. I see how clear the vision and the storytelling is. That there's nothing pandering about it.
Right. At all. Now, do we want to do the letterbox thing?
No, I haven't thought about a letterbox rating yet.
For any new listeners out there, we have a letterboxed accounts. It's a place where you can go and just rate the movies you've been seeing. And in our episodes, we usually like to just start just very quickly laying down our baseline star rating for the movie before we jump in to kind of figure out where we're coming from. This is a hard one. I
agree.
I'm gonna go with a 3.5.
Okay,
but I am definitely willing to be talked up because I think there's a lot there. You know?
Yeah. I'm gonna go with 4.
Okay.
I have mixed feelings about this movie, cinematically as a movie.
Okay.
Let's start by saying I can't imagine what would have happened if more people saw this movie in 1991. Maybe not much, but I feel like it is the antidote to everything the news was saying at the time.
Well, yeah, you're at the very least you're humanizing the people who live in South Central LA.
Yeah.
At the very least, that's the bare minimum of what this movie does.
Yeah, the idea that like you can't talk about an entire region of one of the biggest cities in America with any generality like you are.
Right.
Like, the black people are rioting in South Central LA. Like, all of them, every single one of them. Well, apparently is how the news reported it. In my recollection, this movie just says there are so many people trying to do good things or living right. And not fleeing that area and trying to be good influences and trying to better their lives.
I was actually watching some of the special features on the Blu-ray copy that I had of Boyz N the Hood, and they just had a more recent interview with Cuba Gooding Jr. And his whole feeling on the movie was that at the time, it was speaking to both black and white people. Mostly for blacks, it was a way of saying, here's a movie finally for you. Like, this is our experience. But the movie also was speaking to white audiences as far as Cuba Gooding Jr. was concerned in saying, you think we're animals. And this is to show you that you might think we're animals by what you see on TV, but those actions are pretty much just aspects of survival in a environment. We are human beings just like you. We have families that we care for. We like to barbecue. We like to hang out. We're kids coming of age, just like your kids are coming of age. We're no different as far as human beings are concerned.
Right.
And that the movie was trying to change an overall perception that the people who live there are really just like caged animals.
The caging sort of mindset is kind of exacerbated by the idea that at night there's just constant sweeping of searchlights and dogs barking, and it's like, how is this feeling different than being in a prison? The searchlights, the police patrolling,
right? And the police aren't there to do any real governing or any sort of protection at all. They're basically just there to maintain the people, keep them where they're at. Really.
Right.
Let them do whatever they want to do to each other.
Yeah.
Just make sure that they stay where they're at.
Right. Their interactions with the police are some of like the hardest to watch moments in the movie, where if you haven't seen the movie, there's a break-in at Furious's house, which is what we were talking about in the very beginning of the episode, the clip we played. Right after that, the police show up, and one of them is white and one of them is black.
Well, actually, not right after that. They have to wait for
they wait like
an hour. Yeah.
An hour. So, yeah, it highlights the lack of concern
Right.
or urgency on the police's part to, meet the needs.
Respond.
But the white officer is just kind of there, just kind of like, okay, taking some facts and stuff. But the black police officer is extremely aggressive, uses racial epithets, and actually flat out laments the fact that the burglar hadn't been killed because he thinks it would be better for society for, certain people to just die.
Right.
And then he comes up later again and is just extremely violent and aggressive towards the main character, Trey.
Yeah.
Got any drugs or weapons on you?
No. I didn't do nothing.
You think you tough? You think you're tough, huh? You're scared now, huh? I like that. That's why I took this job. I hate little motherfuckers like you.
It's a very interesting, because I guess as a white viewer, I would have been like, oh, well, they would show like a white police officer being the aggressor. But that is one of the ways that this movie is from a black voice to black audiences, because it begins with the statistic that 1 in 21 inner city youths will be murdered. Most of that will be at the hands of another black person.
And I really liked the opening of this film, by the way. Like, I really thought that having those statistics just starkly put like that put you in a very good mindset for what you were about to see. And then it just zooms right in on a stop sign. Like, just stop.
Yep.
Like, stop. And I don't know if that's a sort of a more of a message about like the violence has to stop, or if it's more of a to the viewer, stop what you're doing and pay attention to this.
Well, and it also, here's facts, because this movie is going to be written off as angry,
Well, yeah, that could be too.
But like the idea that some of the community is dividing itself, and that people are buying into the system by being a police officer, and he's not helping at all. He's being so destructive to that community, people of his own race. And so I just thought that was a really, I never would have considered that perspective, but it's one that they deal with every day. There's the distrust for the police, rightly so, and then the extra betrayal felt
when it's a black police officer.
Yeah.
And that's actually why I felt like, if this was just a pander to some sort of what they wanted to feel was a good cause.
Oh,
we want to make a great movie about this
raising
social
awareness.
issue.
Yeah.
Kind of like the Guess Who's Coming to Dinner.
Yeah.
But for the late 80s, early 90s. Let's talk about black culture in America and do it in a very Hollywood way. But the police issue, there is a lot of race in that and racial issues in that. But by having a lot of the worst offenses from police come from another African American, I think it speaks volumes to the complications of the issues, and that it's not as simple as white people hate black people.
Right.
It's much more systemic.
Yeah.
And that it's systemic to the point where you even have people of the same color who, once they get that level of authority, become no different than the people who originally created the system to begin with.
Right. I was thinking about the title, and I don't know, in my mind, the way I kind of hear it, it's sort of playing with the idea that it would be like slangy and like, sure, the kids, like spell it with a Z, and like, but it's also at that time, and even now, we got to kind of stop acting like it's all salt.
Oh, absolutely not. We should probably get to that at some point in this conversation.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. But even now, I know I've heard white people who, I don't even want to do it, but like say brother, or like, oh, the boys, like use that slang as a way of solidifying the stereotype of like the gangsta, and like, oh yeah, the Boyz N the Hood, I know what they're like. I know what the boys are like. Yeah, that's the gangbanger,
Mm-hmm.
like whatever. But he's saying Boyz N the Hood, it's a college-bound athlete.
Right.
It's a mortgage broker.
Right.
This is the diversity of the people that you're lumping into that
Right.
group.
Lumping
Like,
in as you watch comfortably from the suburbs. You like to
Yes.
romanticize this quote-unquote thug life.
yeah, some people romanticize it. Some people just like demonize it.
Well, yeah, and one way or the other, but I think
Right.
especially youth. I mean, when I was in high school,
Yeah,
you know, it wasn't so much that
Tupac
it was
and
it was a certain
appropriated somebody else's culture.
Right.
It was a rebellion against your parents, and
Mhm.
it was a way to experience something new without any of the realities of it.
I think what Singleton is saying is you've got no idea thug life is real people, good people.
Down to the fact that you've got Doughboy played by Ice Cube, which at the time must have been super shocking.
Yeah.
Who is involved in that?
Yeah.
Who does?
But
pull
not
out
a
his
bad
gun,
person.
but a good
Right.
But a good person with good friends. People are Trey is friends with him, and Trey wants to go to college. Trey wants to treat his girlfriend right, and Doughboy knows Furious, and Furious is a great influence.
Right.
Doughboy's got his areas of problems where he is in the drug game and he is carrying his gun and he's got like the tricked out car. But his brother is a clean cut, like I said, college bound athlete,
Mhm.
college recruited athlete. But that college recruited athlete is a teen father who's got his girlfriend and son living with him and his
Mhm.
mom. You can't say he's bad because he carries a gun. Like, no, he's actually a pretty good friend and he's a
Right.
good brother.
Or he's bad because he's a teenage father.
Or
Yeah.
he's good because he's a college athlete.
Yeah.
Well, he also messed up a little bit and has a kid. He's like, oh, well, that's bad. And he's like, no, but he's a really good dad.
Right.
Oh,
yeah.
well, like, it's just, I don't know how a white audience could have watched this movie in 91 and not just like had the doors blown off of their perception.
And I think another way that Singleton highlights that life is not all that different is by actually looking at the type of movie it is, which is you could interpret as a coming of age film.
Yep.
And I think playing with that idea by referencing a very popular white coming of age film in Stand By Me, having 4 kids and having one of them say you want to go see a dead body. You know, these are kids just like the kids that you loved in Stand By Me.
Right.
They've got the same kind of junior high fascinations that
And
someone
fashion.
and fashion
And
yeah.
clothes. They weren't wearing very stereotypical clothing, like
Right.
button-down shirts. Or
And they were
striped
still
t-shirts
those kids, just like the kids in Stand By Me, get picked on by the older kids, and
Yep.
you feel just as much for them when they are.
Mhm.
If you wanted to boil this movie down, it's just another coming of age movie, but it's also so much more than that.
Right.
Just by it
Absolutely.
being set in the setting that it's in, and being
Yeah.
a setting that just isn't portrayed very often in the way that Singleton portrays it, which
Yeah.
is really just realistically.
Right.
you know?
Right. I mean, it's sort of just saying two kind of not conflicting things, but like we're all the same in that we need to come of age, but also you have no idea what it's like to come of age
In that
this environment. There were some touches in the movie that just struck me as so realistic and sadly realistic, and I can just hear the conversations, or like I can hear those things happening in real life. And one of those is there's the white teacher at the school, the white teacher teaching the kids, you
Mhm.
know, and pretty out of touch with the way they're talking and learning. And then when Trey fights, calls home, and instead of asking about Trey, she asks whether the mother is employed and asks if she went
if the
to
father's
school
around,
and if the
yeah.
father's around. Yeah.
Is there some problem in the home? Are you employed?
That's really none of your business. But since you asked, I am employed and I'm studying to receive my master's degree.
Then you are educated.
Listen, are we going to talk about me or my son?
I'm sorry. Well, we'll be happy to see Trey back in class on Tuesday. His suspension was only for 3 days, you know.
No, I don't think you'll be seeing Trey again.
And why is that, may I ask?
Because Trey is going to live with his father.
His father.
Yes, his father. Or did you think we made babies by ourselves?
I am 100% certain that in white suburban schools, if a child fights, there is no, now are you working? Are you, for the
Right.
call home? But immediately, because it's a black mother and a single mother, like they start questioning her fitness as a mother,
Right.
rather than like trying to help her son. A lot of people would do that, thinking that they were
Being helpful.
Yeah. It's terrible.
And I think
it's
that
it's another thing that I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea what that's like, because nobody would do that to me.
in that scene, you get a glimpse of what it's like, that you probably as a white person just never even thought of. Like, I think, I'm going to be honest here. I hear so many times white people say things like they're just being really oversensitive about this.
Yes.
Even with the awards stuff, I've heard that. I've heard someone say, if there was nothing worth nominating, then what's the big deal? They're just being really oversensitive about this all over again. They always say that all over again, like as if we took care of this already. Why are we bringing it back?
Still talking about this?
And, Boyz N the Hood is 25 years old. There are elements that look dated, but they're all aesthetic. All aesthetic.
Yes.
There is nothing at the core of this movie that is dated whatsoever.
Right.
And that's really sad.
So
And
sad.
if you need any more proof, it's the fact that a movie like Chirac had to come out this year.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many similarities between that movie and Boyz N the Hood.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tremendously sad how relevant this movie still feels.
Yeah.
And you're right. So this week, I always do in my classes, they have a nonfiction article and then they have to answer questions about it. And this week it was about the Oscars. Somebody wrote an op-ed saying that Chris Rock should use his time hosting to call the Oscars out. Like, he should just take it to him, which Chris Rock is amazing at taking things to people.
Yeah.
Like
bringing them down.
Yeah. And some of my kids, and I teach at a mostly white school, one kid was like, well, this is a pretty liberal article. And my co-teacher was like, it's just about equality for people. If you think that's a liberal idea, I think that's sad.
Right.
But you said it like you disagree with it. And he said the same thing. Like, well, if there weren't any nominated, it's about what's better. Like,
yeah.
I had another student who, the author is Muslim of this article. He said something very like factual, like that all the nominees were all white or something. Like he just said something factual about white people. They're all white.
Mm-hmm.
And my student wrote in the margins, it feels like he hates white people. And I was like, that's sensitive. That is playing the race card.
Yeah.
But I hear white people do that all the time. Another time I showed, actually in a class when I was getting my master's, I showed a clip from Chris Rock's stand-up, which has one of like the greatest lines I've ever heard, where he's talking about how he lives I think I've talked about it in this podcast. He talks about how he lives in a neighborhood with 3 other black people, him, Eddie Murphy, Mary J. Blige, and Jay-Z. And he talks about how they are all top of their game entertainers.
Mm-hmm.
His neighbor's a dentist. And he's like, he's not the best dentist in the world. He didn't invent teeth. And he says, black people have to fly to get to where white people can walk to.
Right.
And I had a classmate write to me, it feels like he's racist against white people. And it's so maddening to me that that white people will say they're being sensitive. Then as soon as somebody says, well, I don't think that white people should have all the privilege. They're like, well, that's racist. It's just so embarrassing, the narrow scope of it.
Well, okay, so what maybe we should talk a little bit though about, was there anything that you didn't love about Boyz N the Hood? Maybe we should get into that a little bit.
We should. I wrote in my notes, it's disappointingly conventional.
Yeah. And what do you mean by that?
I think the score,
it's
it's very weak. It's very overwrought.
It's like really
sappy.
And it doesn't do the actors any favors.
No, especially, I don't know how this is going to sound. I feel like coming out of South Central LA in 1991 and the only rap song is playing in like people's cars, and then at the end, this movie could have felt so much more propulsive.
Yeah.
With a more like of that moment score. Like ask Dre to come up with some music for it,
Right.
or
especially during some of the Trey Styles more emotional scenes that feel soap opera-ish. And it's the score.
bad.
You know, it's not his performance. It's not the way the camera's shooting him or anything.
I
It's
think
just
in
the
part it is
score.
the way the camera's shooting him. The lighting
Oh, okay.
is so unnatural.
I could see that. Yeah.
The lighting, it's just everything is like bright light. Every room had apparently so much light. Daylight and indoors looked the same.
Mhm.
And to me, that really was like,
Took you out of it a little bit.
yeah. It felt very cheap. But I mean, I'm not going to like totally fault the movie for that.
Right.
But it was just one of those things.
This feels in a lot of ways like a director's first movie,
Yes.
even though it's super impressive.
Yeah.
But there are moments where
It's
I'm
very
kinda like-
confident though.
Yeah. For a first try, it's incredible,
Yeah.
you know, but it still has those touches that make you
Yes.
kind of, that remind you a more
quite
assured
learn
or
to
a more,
control.
a more experienced director would have probably made a different choice in here.
Yeah.
There's something very weird in the way that it's a great scene, but there's the scene where Furious takes Trey, his son, and Ricky, the college-bound kid, to Compton. And
That scene's incredible.
that is an incredible scene, but it feels unnatural in the way it unfolds. Like
Yep.
all of a sudden, everyone in the street just kind of gathers around him. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe there's a point to that. I almost kind of feel like Lawrence Fishburne, who plays Furious, he's kind of like a Jesus
Yeah.
character. Like he almost gives
Like
his
the
Sermon on the Mount to them in that scene, but also to Trey in the beginning when he lays out his like rules for living. You
Yeah.
know? And so I get that as a character. Like I'm even fine with it having that sort of messianic quality to it, and and kind of bringing the ideas of. I mean, a lot of people compare him to Malcolm in the movie.
Yeah.
But again, it's more just in the way it unfolds in the movie. It's the movie's way of it. Just felt like this seems very unnatural. All these people are just sort of gathering around for what?
Well,
what, like did he have a reputation where every
Right.
time he comes out, you're going to want to hear this guy talk? I didn't
Yeah.
get that sense.
No, I
didn't,
agree.
You know,
The shooting of it
seemed
was
like
a
a
little bit
stranger
odd.
coming into an area.
Right.
And people coming to see what's this guy all about, but they didn't come antagonistically. You know,
Wait,
like
I thought they did. That was the way I saw it unfolding, because Trey and Ricky seemed like, what are we doing
They seemed
here?
scared.
You're going to get a
Yes.
shot.
Yeah.
And then they, like, these strangers pull up in this car and the people started coming across the street.
Right.
And I thought they looked very menacing. Like, what are you doing here? And being very unwelcoming. Furious wasn't afraid of it
yeah.
because he was there with a message that he knew they needed to hear.
And it was incredible. I mean, it's like a perfect little sermon on gentrification.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the message, what it stands for. It's called gentrification. It's what happens when the property value of a certain area is brought down. Huh? You listening? Yeah. They bring the property value down. They can buy the land at a lower price. Then they move all the people out, raise the property value, and sell it at a profit. Now what we need to do is we need to keep everything in our neighborhood, everything, black. Black owned with black money. Just like the Jews, the Italians, the Mexicans, and the Koreans do.
Ain't nobody from outside bringing down the property value. It's these folks shooting each other and selling that crack rock and shit.
Well, how you think the crack rock gets into the country? We don't own any planes. We don't own no ships. But we are not the people who are flying and floating that shit in here. I know every time you turn on the TV, that's what you see. Black people selling the rock, pushing the rock, pushing the rock. Yeah, I know. But that wasn't a problem as long as it was here. Wasn't a problem until it was in Iowa and it showed up on Wall Street where there are hardly any black people. Now, if you want to talk about guns, why is it that there's a gun shop on almost every corner in this community?
Why?
Tell you why. For the same reason that there's a liquor store on almost every corner in the black community. Why? They want us to kill ourselves. You go out to Beverly Hills.
Yeah, I agree. But then, like, the content saves the movie for me, because the content is so vital and alive. Now, I feel like the filmmaking techniques and the look maybe don't work well with us because it's just been mimicked since. Because every review I read from that time, like Roger Ebert's 4-star review of it and the Time review, everybody just called it such an exciting, vibrant movie that was just like nothing they had seen before.
Right.
I'm like, okay. And I was trying to think of like what were things that were fresh at that time. And one was, I wondered if maybe like when he's telling his dad about how he had sex and his voiceover
is the voice
way
of the woman.
people are talking, like instead of going back to the flashback and having the scene play out.
Yeah, I did notice
you see
that,
the scene and he's telling the story. I wondered if that had been a new technique at the time.
Then copied in Drunk History.
Yeah, right. Right. I don't know, maybe the barbecue scene, I think.
That's a great scene. I love that scene.
Yeah, but it feels like the rest of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But I think maybe at the time it could have felt alive and it popped off the screen more than it does now.
Yeah.
What's up, my brother? Looks like she wants to talk to you over there.
Yeah, I know. I'm just taking my time.
Oh, I see. So you're trying to run that game.
Yeah, how am I doing?
Well, you're doing just fine. Just fine. Except for one thing, my brother.
Yeah, what's that?
She left.
What?
Oh, that's all right. Oh.
Hey.
Now, I don't think there's a bad scene in the movie, really, from like a content standpoint. Do you?
There's scenes that as I'm watching it, I'm kind of like, is this cheesy or am I just
a little preachy? I mean, too much to the point.
Some of when Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character Trey Styles is really kind of having his breakdown moments, I was kind of like, is this too much? Mm-hmm. Is it kind of getting into melodrama?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. You want to end up like little Chris in a wheelchair, huh? Right? No, you want to end up like Doughboy, huh? No? Give me the gun, Trey. You're my only son, and I'm not gonna lose you to no bullshit, you hear? I love you, man.
The score doesn't help with that. We've already talked about that.
But then Jr.'s performance doesn't help with that.
Yeah, it's not, but it's a really good performance. But I think there's something very fascinating about the fact that Trey Styles reacts the way you would expect someone to react when someone is shot. Mm-hmm. And Ice Cube comes, and this is his brother, and it's strange. Like, you know that this has hit him deeply, but he doesn't show it really. It's very true to me in that performance. So it's kind of counterbalanced.
He
doesn't break down.
Like if they were all doing that, then it would be like a little much. But since that was how Trey reacted, and it was so different, then that Trey's feels realer.
Trey's feels
more plausible.
Trey's feels like what you would think you would do if someone very close to you had lost their life.
Yeah.
And there's something very complex about I think what Ice Cube is. I don't know if it's intentional, but at least it's what he's showing on screen.
Yeah.
You can kind of tell he feels like he's in a way failed his brother.
Yeah.
But only really because he felt like he didn't get to the alley in time. There's also something very complex about the fact that they had just fought beforehand, so he's probably still carrying some of that anger.
No, you're right. That's all in there.
It's all in there, but he's really, I mean, for someone who's never acted before, I can't tell if it's because they've never acted or if he's just that good and he's underplaying it.
Yeah.
He's actually playing it as someone who sees themselves as kind of a gangster, and I mean actually a gangster, a member of like a gang.
And tries to show that.
Even later on when he seeks revenge, his face
sad.
is so stone-faced.
Yeah.
Like you can't tell that he's super angry when he shoots him. You can't tell that it's not like I'm getting what I need out of this.
It's going through the motions.
Yes.
Which is part of what the movie's saying. That there isn't really malice to any of this. It's just what you do. This is what we know.
It's like everyone's got a code they live by.
What do you do when someone gets shot? You shoot someone else. This is how it goes. Here's how I act towards women. Here's how I act towards people I don't know.
Right. And someone who doesn't live in that environment would say, well, yeah, but we all know killing someone's wrong. So why would you go do that?
You have a
but
choice.
You realize
Nobody made you pull that trigger.
Do that. But then you realize there's no justice in the legal system about this. The cops aren't going to come and take care of this.
Right. And if the cops do show up, do you think they're going to be sympathetic?
Right.
Or they're going to see everybody as a suspect and find a way to prosecute? anybody they can.
Through these characters, you're living their experience, and you completely understand, though they are just going through the motions, why they're there.
Right.
So I guess the whole point of what I'm saying about that is the melodrama that it maybe seems to sink into. I don't know if that's a weakness of the film when you have it sort of weighed out with these other moments that seem so.
Yeah. Are you just showing us the spectrum of emotion?
Yeah.
I think that's how I saw it. Balance doesn't mean neutral.
Yeah. So maybe another point where I'm not sure how I feel about the movie is the character of Ricky. Is that too stock of a character?
I wondered that too.
He kind of serves the purpose to where I knew pretty early on, maybe even when they were still kids, that he was going to die. And I was trying to remember, did I just know that because of what I heard about the movie, or is it just that obvious?
Telegraph.
That sort of archetypal character of the sort of weak person who has to die.
Oh, you think he's weak?
Well, how is he? I mean, he's strong in the sense that, you're right. He's a good father. He's a good person. I mean, the movie makes him weak, right? I mean, he doesn't stand up for himself when the football is taken from him as a kid.
Yeah.
And he needs Doughboy to kind of defend him almost his entire life.
He does, but he doesn't become like Doughboy.
No, he doesn't. So he's strong in character.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what, that's what, again, this is a guy who was the most upright character. There was like nothing you could, unless you really wanted to dig and fault him for being a teenage father.
Right.
Otherwise, there was like nothing wrong with this guy.
Yeah.
He was a perfect individual.
The way I kind of interpreted that was an argument against people who think that it's easy to get out. Like, he was on his way out, but he had to be peak athlete. He had to fly to get to where the white man could walk to.
Yeah, you're right.
He was so close and he did everything right, but just where they live.
What I'm trying to wrestle with is the burden that is on a filmmaker like Singleton with a movie like this.
Yeah.
There's a heavy burden of the message you're sending across that sadly has to represent your entire ethnicity. And so the characters sometimes sacrifice nuance for being what needs to get the message across.
Right.
I don't know if I can fault Singleton for that at all.
Yeah.
But it still becomes the reality of, like, I don't think Ricky is all that
nuance to Ricky, because you look at that scene with the recruiter and the way he can't wait to get out of there, even though he's black, and the way that they have to be perfect. It's a microcosm of a burden that we know nothing about,
right?
Where no matter what type of person you are, you get lumped in with the lowest common denominator. It's the same reason when there's the demonstrations in Ferguson and white pundits were calling on Barack Obama to like, it's like, really, Barack Obama doesn't have anything to do with it.
Right.
Like, as the president, he does, but were people calling on Barack Obama to comment on the people in Oregon? Not really.
Right.
Were people calling on?
You mean the people who were who had taken over
the federal land? Yeah. Were people calling on Paul Ryan? Like, you need to, what's going on with white people?
Right.
Like, that never happened. But for black people, for minorities, religious minorities too, one person who identifies anywhere near with what you identify with, and they do a terrible thing, you have to explain that away.
Yeah, and that just being in that community,
right?
Which is something that I didn't really think all that much about. The sort of guilt that you might have if you do leave the community, until I listened to like Kendrick Lamar and the what's the track on To Pimp a Butterfly, where he's drunk wrestling with this idea of like leaving his community behind, and feeling like almost an obligation to that community because you did somehow get out of it,
right? Or even on how much does a dollar cost? He has made it out, and the homeless person is asking him for money, and he's like, I don't owe you anything. But then he kind of wrestles with, well, do I owe him something? And Ricky may be a broadly drawn stock character, but I think to me, it underlines the idea you have to be nearly perfect to be not lumped in with the worst elements in your community.
Yeah. What I do appreciate about Boyz N the Hood, take a different character like Furious Styles, the Lawrence Fishburne character. The movie does a really great job of messing with your assumptions right away, especially for a white audience.
Yes.
Because what did you think this guy was going to be?
Oh yeah,
like?
I thought it was going to be a terrible house, and that the
guy was going to be a terrible father because where was he?
And when she brings him over, he's smiling, and she's like, "You wanted this," and he's like, "I did." Like it was pretty much like you finally got what you wanted. He wanted his son the whole time. It's just that they thought it would be better for him to be with his mother, and up to that point, it was. And he was a father figure to so many of the other boys.
Yeah.
Like you don't really see many other fathers, really.
Well, he says that,
Yeah.
you know, like he talks up when he tells them to rake up the leaves, and he says, you know, I know you think I'm being hard on you, but a lot of these kids in the neighborhood don't have this.
Well, and the movie's a pretty strong, and I thought this was surprising, a strong treatise against male chauvinism and male control and the illusion that men can control women. There are a lot of female characters, even just side characters, who stand up for themselves. Like, why we all have to be bitches and hoes.
And even Reva Stiles, the mother character, you know, aside from the fact that the whole time she's working on a master's degree, you get that really great conversation between her and Furious at the restaurant. The whole time you're thinking, boy, this is a really great father. You know, he's so great. He's there for his son. And then the movie reminds you, she actually says, you're not special for watching your own son, for taking care of your own son.
All of that, but Trey is a grown man now. He is not a little boy anymore. That time has passed, sweetheart. You missed it. Excuse me, I'm gonna get some cigarettes.
No, you're not getting off that easy. Sit your ass down.
Excuse me?
I said sit your ass down before I raise my voice and make a fool out of both of us.
Okay.
Now, it's my time to talk. Of course you took in your son, my son, our son. And you taught him what he needed to be a man. I'll give you that, because most men ain't man enough to do what you did. But that gives you no reason, do you hear me? No reason to tell me that I can't be a mother to my son. What you did is no different from what mothers have been doing from the beginning of time. It's just too bad more brothers won't do the same. But don't think you're special.
Don't think that the fact that he's raising his son is what makes him great.
Right.
What's great about this guy is the wisdom he has.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And the way that he's able to sort of bestow that on not just his son, but other people in the community. And that I couldn't quite gather what he did for a living. It had something to do
with
with
a mortgage broker.
Yeah, it had something to do with housing. He's kind of like the George Bailey. He did it for the community. He did it for the town.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't just to make his own profits.
And I also really like that his name is Furious, because there's a lot of narrative that immediately writes off anybody who's angry. I love that this guy is furious and thoughtful and a good father and effective and noble. And it just reminds you, not so subtly, that there's a lot of anger in level-headed people. And there should be a lot of anger. So basically, after seeing this movie, I think we both feel like it is frustratingly relevant.
Right. I wish we could watch it and be like, boy, that's a relic of the past. Yeah.
But it certainly is not. It's still a very important movie. Almost, primary source. I'm very glad I saw it. I'm glad I finally saw it.
Me too.
I think my Letterboxd rating, I'm going to hold it at a 4.
Yeah, I'll bump it up to a 4.
Might as well.
Like you said, I'm so glad I watched it.
Yeah.
And I think everyone should watch it.
I'm pretty sure we're best buds on this.
Yeah, I think so.
I feel like we'd be perpetuating a cycle of violence if we were anything but.
Right. And I don't want to look back on this episode 25 years later and sadly say nothing's changed between me and Ryan.
Yeah.
So let's keep it at best buds.
Sounds good.
And why don't we go ahead and let's talk about what we're going to do in our next episode of Can We Still Be Friends?
Yeah. We try to tie things in to what's happening in the world or with movies. We try. Sometimes it works really well. Sometimes it works too well. Sometimes
we're reaching.
Yeah, sometimes we're reaching. This time we're sort of reaching. We're sort of not. Hail Caesar by the Coen brothers came out. A movie we're very excited about.
Super excited.
Because we really enjoy the Coen brothers.
Love the Coen brothers.
Nate's sons are Joel and Ethan. He named his sons. Yeah, it's not because of the Coen brothers, but it didn't hurt.
It's certainly factored into it a little bit.
So we are going to be doing the movie Barton Fink.
Yes. Another 25.
It came out 25 years ago, 1991. Yeah. Boyz
So
N the Hood,
piggybacking
Barton
off
Fink,
of
sure.
this Boyz N the Hood conversation, there's a connection. a
There
little
is. There are connections, but the fact of the matter is, we really want to watch another Coen Brothers movie.
Right. We haven't done a Coen Brothers movie.
We
for
have
this,
not.
Which
We
which
haven't.
is
Because we don't necessarily disagree about them.
right.
But this is one. Okay, so Nate and I have both seen Barton Fink, but I saw it a long time ago. And I feel like I kind of saw it with one eye. Like, I got it so I could check it off the list pretty much,
Yep.
but I have not. I couldn't tell you a lot about it.
right. But I remember really liking it.
Right.
I just don't really remember why.
Right. So we're going to watch Barton Fink and talk about that for our next episode.
Hopefully by then we've seen Hail Caesar as well.
Right.
Maybe we can bring that into the conversation as well. So
the fact of the matter is, this is our podcast. We do what we want.
right. You can't stop us.
Yeah, so stop trying. Watch it with us. If you've seen Barton Fink, let us know what you think.
Yeah. Or if you have a oh wow.
Oh, it was
So
great.
poetic.
That was great.
Wow.
If you haven't seen Boyz N the Hood, we definitely think that you should.
You should. It would be good to see Boyz N the Hood.
Nate, come on. It's old.
I'm just trying to keep up, man.
I understand.
This is the closest we're ever going to get to a rap battle.
Yeah, that's true. And I conclusively won.
You did.
So, as usual, you've got Twitter. Our handle is at CWSBF. To reach out to us there.
Yeah, chime in a little bit. Maybe you have a favorite Coen Brothers movie. Maybe you're crazy and you don't like the Coen Brothers movie.
Wow, that's pretty judgmental. Maybe you don't like the Coen Brothers and you would like to tell us why, and we can tell you why those reasons are wrong. You can like us on Facebook, iTunes ratings. You could give us an old 5-star rating on iTunes or 4 stars or whatever. Or you can make a podcast about what you rated our episodes with a friend. And
yeah, we don't have a spin-off podcast
we
yet.
don't. Can We Still Be Friends about Can We Still Be Friends? That's just off the top of my head, one title. That could work.
Spitballing here.
Yeah. You could send us an email at feedback@canwestillbefriends.net or find us on our website, canwestillbefriends.net.
Of the same domain. You can also leave us a message. Voicemail box is not quite full, so you can fill it up if you want with your thoughts. 847-306-9532. We would love to hear from you.
Mm-hmm.
So we just want to thank you, as always, for listening to us ramble about a movie for a while. And we hope you watch Barton Fink with us. Let us know what you think of Boyz N the Hood. And watch the Oscars and chime in about that as well. We'll probably do the same.
I bet.
I don't see why not.
Might as well.
I don't get out much.
Nope.
Especially on Sunday nights.
It's a real downer of an ending. Yeah, we're lonely and boring. And anyway. No, we're not
we're
lonely.
friends.
We're
We're
not
best
lonely.
buds.
We're not lonely. Right?
Thanks for listening.